Alright, so a couple days ago I did an egg cutting video where we pulled some Ball Python eggs out of the incubator. We cut them open and took a sneak peek and saw the results from pairing some of these Ball Pythons. And today it's been about 2 days after the egg cutting, so what I want to do today is I want to take a closer look at some of those hatchlings. I'm thinking most, if not all of them, should be completely out of the egg. And it's always interesting looking at them for the very first time, because sometimes when you're just, kind of cutting the egg and looking into like the bubbly mess of an egg, you really can't tell what's in there until they completely come out of the egg, and then you can really see them for the first time. So today I want to take a closer look at them. I want to give them names, and then I want to put them up in the hatchling rack. And keep in mind, these will actually be the ones that I post over on Morph Market. I'd say usually you have to give them about a week to shed out, and then at least 2 weeks before you can get them over to frozen thaw. I'd say like 2 to 3 weeks. So you're looking at maybe about 3 to 4 weeks before you'll see them pop up for sale over on Morph Market. And this is actually 2 different boxes of eggs, 2 different clutches. So the first one was actually my dinker project, where I took my Coral Glow and I bred it to a dinker, hoping to reproduce the unusual color and pattern of the dinker. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. This is like my 3rd year trying to prove out that dinker, and for whatever reason, I just cannot reproduce that unusual color and pattern of that normal. And I thought the dinker was 50% het pied, and we've been breeding it year after year to a het pied, and you'd figure like 1 out of 4 should be a visual pied. I have yet to see a visual pied come out of that dinker. So for whatever reason, it just looks really unusual, but I don't think it's genetic, and I don't think it's het pied. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about this, maybe next year I'll breed a visual pied to that, and then we'll have better odds. We'll have like 50-50, visual pieds and het pieds. So I'll actually at least prove out the het pied if it's in there. So I might do 1 more year with the visual pied on that dinker, and then if that doesn't work, I might just switch to like bamboos or something and keep bringing my bamboo to the dinker. And then the other one, for the other box, I actually bred 2 scaleless heads together, and pretty much the crown jewel of the whole thing was I produced a completely scaleless Bol Python, a pinstripe scaleless. And that's probably the only one that I'm going to hold back for sure and keep as a future breeder here in my collection. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I want to pull these hatchlings out of the incubator and we'll check them out. Alright, so I want to start with my dinker clutch. Basically, it was a Coral Glow bred to an unusual looking normal. And we'll see what we got here. Alright, not bad odds on that one. So 1 year I actually got all Coral Glows. Every single one was a Coral Glow. And I was actually hoping for some normals because I wanted to see that unusual color and pattern in some of my normals. And the one that is my dinker, I showed you that in the last video, but essentially what it was is it looked like a normal, except it had a really strong stripe right down the top of the back, like a bubbly stripe, and kind of floating alien heads, almost like a Mojave or something on the side. But looking at these normals, I'd say this is about as normal as you can get. No unusual color and pattern in this one. So yeah, these are just like just normals, no hets or anything as far as, well, as a matter of fact, the Coral Glow is 100% het pied, so these would be 50% het pied on these. Yes, don't want to forget about the het pieds. I was actually shooting for a visual pied too, which I didn't get. Alright, so we're going to take a look at this one first. Then we'll just go through, take a quick look, and we'll give them a name. So this is my 3rd clutch. My first clutch was actually my retics. The second one was my albino het pieds. And then this one is my 3rd clutch. So if we take a look at this guy, what I like to do is when I first look at a snake, I want to make sure it has both eyes, make sure there's no genetic defects anywhere on the snake. Usually with a normal, sometimes with the het pieds, you can see really strong tracks down either side, like almost like this right here. You can see almost like right along the tail. I would almost bet, I'd bet money on this one that this one's het pied, because of these lines on either side of the belly, right by the vent. So Usually that's a really strong indication that you do have a het pied. So I would say this one is, I would bet money that this would be 100% het pied, but I would sell it as 50%. Then I'd put in the description, I'd explain that I think it's 100% on this one. So looking really good. Usually I don't figure out the males and the females until they're ready to sell. Usually after about 8 or 9 live mouse hoppers, then you switch them over to frozen thawed. And then right before I post them over on Morph Market, I'll actually probe them and figure out the males and the females. But this is a really good looking thing. Another thing I like to do is make sure they don't have any kinks in the spine. Sometimes they'll have genetic defects where they can't completely straighten the spine. So this one looks good, no genetic defects. I would say this is probably a het pied. I'd probably bet money on I bet you 50 cents this is a het pied. Alright, so let's pull a name out of the jar here. And we'll see on this one. So you'll see them eventually pop up over on Morph Market. Alright, so I actually got these names from the comments under my videos. People put names. Alright, so here's a good name. This one is named Slinky. Alright, so for setup I actually use an ARS hatchling rack made by ARS Caging, and they actually come with these little disposable cups and a cup holder. And I put a little hotspot over here. I actually have a 90-degree hotspot, like a heat strip on a heat controller. And then I use the coconut husk chips. I put some fresh chips in there. And then on the end over here, I can show you this. If you haven't seen this before, I actually use these feeding cards, which are pretty awesome, especially for hatchlings. You want to make sure they eat enough rodents before you ship them out. And yeah, I have those on every single one. So. And they're just 3x5 cards, and I just print them on my printer. Oh, then I have to make a label with my label maker too. Alright, so then for label, I just put the name Slinky on there, and then I put the clutch number. So in this one, it's C0322, the third clutch of 2022. And then normal 50% het pied. And then what I'll do is, when it's ready to post over on Morph Market, I'll print another one out that just says male or female, and I'll just mark a male and female right next to this so I know what they are. Alright, so let's take a look at the next one here. Let me zoom out just a little bit so it's got a pretty good focus. Since I got the label, the label for that one all set up, I'm just going to do another normal. So this one, let's take a look at this guy. Another normal, not a dinker. Unbelievable. And the thing I like about ball pythons is they're not snappy at all right out of the egg. Those retics, when I hatched out some retics for the first time this year, and they were like really snappy right out of the egg, which is really surprising. It's kind of nice to go back to ball pythons where they're not so... I'm not going to get bit. I know 100% sure I'm not going to get bit from this guy. So this is kind of interesting. Look at the stripe down the neck on this one. It kind of has almost like the bubbly stripe down the neck. And that's how it was on that dinker. Only the whole way down the whole snake, it was really pronounced like that bubbly stripe. But this one doesn't go down the whole snake. Maybe it was just an unusual looking normal. That's what I'm thinking on that dinker. This one looks good. Has both eyes. Mouth looks good. No kinks in the spine or anything. Alright, so these guys are behaving. I don't have to cover it. Alright, so I'm going to pull a name for this one. I've never used this name before. This guy's name is Moss. That's a good one. Alright, so let's move on to the next one here. And these guys, it seems like they look completely different now versus when they shed out. The first time they shed, they have a lot of like purples and oranges, and it's really impressive after they shed out for the first time. And then as they get older, of course, they completely change into kind of like a two-tone orange with a bunch of freckles. And when they're young, they don't have any freckles. So this guy's looking good. His eyes look good. See if he's all right in the spine. He is squirrely. This guy's got some energy here. It's kind of interesting too on these coral glows. If you look at the patterns, a lot of times they'll have almost like alien heads, like a normal, but the pattern on my coral glow is really jumbled up. It doesn't really have these repeating patterns that you see like on this one. I think there's something in my coral glow that's kind of floating around. Haven't really isolated it to where, I thought I isolated it last year, but I was convinced it was just a pastel, a really dark pastel. So I sold it. I thought for sure I isolated it, but it was weird because it kind of came out dark, and then the older it got, it seemed like it got yellower and yellow. It's more and more convinced me that it was just a pastel instead of the isolated mystery gene on that one. So. All right, this guy's looking great. No problems at all with this guy. Pull a name out of the hat here. Here's a good name. I don't know if I've used this name either. This guy's name is Comet. All right, so let's move on to the next one. The one thing I did notice about these guys are pretty chunky, pretty beefy looking snakes. I've had some, every now and then you get one that's a little bit thicker, but sometimes they'll be really super skinny too. But these guys have some pretty good weight to them. This one looks good. It's kind of weird on some of these, they have like highlights of orange kind of popping through. You'll see that a lot on some of your young coral glows. It seems to fade out a little bit. Sometimes they'll have a lot of orange in the sides. That can kind of fade out too when they get a little bit older. This one's looking good. The eyes look good. He definitely has the repeating pattern on the side. You see nothing really unusual about that guy. So we'll pull a name for this one. This one's looking good. Here's a name I haven't used before. This guy's name is Rex. Alright, so the last one in this box, and you can definitely tell these guys are ready to shed. You definitely want to keep them hydrated, give them a little bit more humidity so they can shed off good for the first time. Usually young snakes I found, that it seems like the first few sheds you really never have a problem like you do with older snakes. I've never really had a young snake get stuck in a shed for the first like 2 or 3. And it's funny, the substrate can even dry out too, completely dry out, and it seems like they shed a lot better than the older snakes, which is kind of interesting. This guy's looking good. Has a cute face. Has kind of interesting line right down the back of the neck. The first part of the neck right there. Whoa! All right, buddy, where are you going? All right, so looks like he's got interesting patterns on the side. Nothing really unusual. Looks good. Back looks straight. Good looking snake. And keep in mind these are all male makers too, so I can almost guarantee all these are males, and then the normals are going to be females. So that female that was 50% het pied, well, all these are 50% het pied, but that female that I thought was 100%, I'm pretty sure that normal, I'm pretty sure that one's going to be a female. So that's what a lot of people are looking for too, is the cheap female het pieds. So that one will probably go pretty fast. Alright, so this one's name is Reese. Alright, so here's a new box. This is my scaleless head to scaleless head. So the cross was a lesser scaleless head crossed to a lemon blast scaleless head. So you have lesser, pastel, and pinstripe all in here. And you can get scaleless heads and completely scaleless ball pythons. And take a look at this one. Nice. Got some fancy ones in there. Got a whole bunch of different stuff in there. So I'm going to start with the crown jewel, the one that I'm going to hold back. This one right here. Hopefully this one's okay. Kind of halfway in the eggshell right here. This is my first time ever touching a scaleless. Look at that crazy scaleless. No scales. It does not feel like I expected. It feels kind of like a big blob of jelly. It doesn't feel like a snake. It feels weird. So this one I was thinking, I don't know, this one, I was thinking it had at least pinstripe in it. It might actually have pastel. It might be a lemon blast scaleless. It's possible, I don't know, it's so reduced. You know, it could have lesser in it too, but I don't know. It's, you know, with the scaleless, it's completely different than and really anything that has scales. I might have to go over to Morph Market and see if there's like a lemon blast lesser. I don't know exactly what's in here. I know there's probably at least pinstripe because of this really strong stripe right down. I thought it was just a pinstripe scaleless, but now that I look at it, there might be some other genes kind of floating around in there too. So it'll be interesting to see if it's a male or a female. The cool thing is, if it's a male, which would be really cool, I could breed it to other stuff and everything would come out as a scaleless head. And then I could prove out the individual genes too, which would be pretty awesome. Wow, that is a crazy looking snake. Looking good. It's interesting. Well, this is really interesting too. Because if you look at the nose, you know, so this is kind of interesting on this. So I always thought that the scaleless, the super scaleless head actually still had pits on the nose, but the micro scale, the super micro scale, didn't have pits. And look at this one. If you can actually see it, there's no pits. The heat pits on the nose, which makes me think maybe this is actually the micro scale version of the scaleless head. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. So that's kind of interesting. I thought, ooh, it's going to the bathroom. Going to the bathroom as I hold it. So the other interesting thing is when I was actually holding the just the scaleless head, it seemed like the scaleless head kind of had raised little bumps all over it, and you know, some people were saying that that could be the micro scale version of the scaleless head. So that's kind of interesting. I'll have to ask some experts to see if this is actually a super micro scale or a super scaleless head. Both of them are different versions of the completely scaleless ball python. So that's pretty interesting. Something that I haven't seen before. I just wanted to check out the belly. Wow, look at the belly on this thing. That's a crazy belly. No scales on the belly, just one line right down the belly. I always thought they had scales on the belly too. No scales at all. That's wild. That's a wild looking snake right there. That's probably the craziest snake that I've ever produced in my life. That is something else right there. I'm definitely holding that one back. Not for sale. Alright, so let's take a look at the... you know what? I pulled the name Pasta, but I already have a Pasta in my collection. I don't have this name in my collection. Alright, this guy's name is Boomer. Alright, so for that one, when I make the label for that one, I'm actually adding all the genes. This is kind of what I've been doing lately. So this is actually, I put a lesser pastel pinstripe scaleless just because I'm not 100% sure about the genes in that one. So I put all the genes, and a lot of times I'll actually go back and I'll start looking at, you know, stuff on Morph Market, some future stuff that I make, and I'll go back and be like, hey, wait a minute, that's that's not right. And I'd rather scratch them out than have to go back and try to figure out what other genes were in that clutch. And that's kind of the way I've been doing it on the, when you're in doubt, always put the extra genes until you can figure it out later down the road. Alright, so let's take a look at another snake here. Alright, so what I want to do is get rid of some of these eggshells here. Alright, so let's take a look at this one. This one, I've never produced one of these before. This is, I believe this is a scaleless head, because you can see right on the top of the nose there's some scales missing, so it's a scaleless head for sure. Usually with the scaleless heads you can see the last scale right before the vent is split in two, and yes, the last scale right before the vent, if you can see it, that last scale has a vertical split right in the scale. So every time I have a scaleless head, that last scale is split. So far my whole collection, I looked at every single snake, and every single non-scaleless head has a solid scale there. Every single scaleless head has a split. So far in my collection, it's 100% accurate just looking at the scale. Sometimes the expression of the scales on the head can be so small, you almost have no scales missing from the head, and sometimes it's hard to tell by just looking at the head. So I'm pretty sure this one is a kingpin. This is my very first kingpin. So this is a lesser pinstripe. So if you have a queen pin, there's kings and queens. I actually have a video on kings and queens. So the kings are actually the same snake without pastel. So if you add pastel to this, you'll actually get a queen pin. So the queen pin is also called an emperor, or an emperor pin, or an emperor pinstripe. It's all the same for the same combination of pastel pinstripe lesser. So this one, I believe, is a kingpin mainly because of the color of the top of the head. Usually the queen pins have a lighter head on top of the head. Usually the kingpins are darker like this. I think. So that's pretty cool. My very first kingpin, which is awesome. Scaleless head kingpin too. So now I might actually, I don't know if I want to hang on to that one or not. I'm not sure. All right, here's an interesting name. I think I'm gonna skip that one. That one sounds like it's a name for like a cartoon character or something. All right, here's a cute name. All right, this guy's name is Cheesecake. That's a good one. All right, so let's take a look at what else we have here. So, let's see here. This one. Let's take a look at this one here. This one, to me, looks like a lesser. I don't think there's pastel in there. I would think if there was pastel, the head would be a little bit lighter on this one, maybe. It's so hard to tell since they haven't shed for the first time. Usually after the first shed, you can really tell. And what's weird, with some combinations, especially if you have like pastel and with bamboo, a lot of times you can't tell that the pastel is in with the bamboo until they age maybe like 2 or 3 months, and then the pastel really starts turning yellow. But when they first hatch out of the egg, the pastel bamboos and the regular bamboos look almost identical. You really can't tell them apart. So sometimes it can be a little bit tricky when they first come out of the egg. I'm thinking this one is just a lesser. Usually the lessers are a lot brighter than that, but I think it's just because it hasn't shed for the first time. So I believe this one is a lesser. Oh, we could look for scaleless head on this one. It doesn't look like there's scaleless head. Let me take a look at the last scale here. It's a solid scale. Not scaleless head. Not even one tiny little scale missing. Alright, just a nice looking lesser. We should be checking for kinks every single time. I actually almost bought a snake at a show once, and the guy handed me a snake. I was like, wait a minute, this snake is kinked, and the guy didn't even know because he didn't check for kinks. So you always want to make sure before you sell it to a customer, before you hand it to someone trying to sell it as a healthy snake, you definitely don't want any kinks in the spine or anything like that. Alright, so let's pull a name for this guy. And yes, I can choose to reject a name if I get a weird name. Alright, so here's a good name. This guy's name is Bambi. Alright, so I took a little break. I ran upstairs and I looked at Morph Market. I wanted to look at the that completely scaleless ball python, and no one has ever produced a pastel pinstripe lesser scaleless, which would be the queen pin scaleless if I hit all the genes. So I'm thinking it might have all the genes, but it's really hard to tell. I've seen some pinstripes that look pretty crazy, just a pinstripe scaleless. So I'll have to prove that one out before I'm 100% sure on that one. Alright, so this is kind of interesting. So take a look at this. It looks like this one's a scaleless head. Looks like this one is not a scaleless head. Let me look at the last scale here. It looks like a solid scale. Alright, so I wanted to show you the difference between these. So these are both pastels. One is scaleless head, the other one is not. It's a really high expression scaleless head. So take a look at this one. So I kind of wanted to show you the differences just by looking at them without actually seeing the scaleless head. So you can see this one right here is a scaleless head, and look at how much brighter it is. You'll be able to see it once they shed out. It's definitely brighter. It seems like it thins out the scales and really brightens the snake a lot more. The other thing I found with the scaleless head is it almost acts like enchi. So take a look at this, how it almost gets, it's kind of hard with pastel because pastel can be pretty variable. Whoa, come on. This guy's like, sometimes they kind of freak out and right out of the box because they've never been touched. But you'll actually see on this one, it almost looks like enchi where it has these bands, and that's pretty typical of your scaleless heads, that a lot of times it'll actually act like enchi in a lot of your even single genes, which is pretty interesting. So if you actually look at my Lemon Blast females, both of them are scaleless heads, and they both look like they have enchi in them. And you compare that to this one where it's not really reduced at all, you can see a huge difference between clutch mates. The overall effect, the multi effects that you have just from the scaleless heads, which is pretty interesting. So there is quite a bit of difference. As a matter of fact, I thought even if you didn't go for the scaleless head or the completely scaleless ball pythons, you could actually just run the scaleless heads through your collection. I think it really improves the snakes. Just one copy of the gene with the scaleless head, which is pretty awesome. Kind of reduces it and brightens it up, kind of like one of the high-end enchi. Some of the enchis can really brighten your snakes too, and really reduce the pattern. Almost acts exactly like enchi, I would say, in a lot of cases. Alright, so this one's a pastel scaleless head. We're going to give this one a name. Alright, this guy's name is Ramen with an apostrophe. That's a cute name. Alright, so here's the last one. This is the pastel, just a regular pastel. No hets, no scaleless heads. Really pretty chunky, really dark. Look at how dark that one is. Seems like it's a little bit shorter, not quite as long as some of the other ones, it seems like. Still really healthy. Looking really good. So the other thing here in my collection is I was thinking I might run out of hatchling tubs. I have 130, I think it was 137 eggs so far this year, and I have a couple more females that are going to lay eggs. So I'm thinking I might be up to like 150. This is probably my best year ever for ball pythons. Well, of course, my reticulated python laid a lot of eggs. So I'm kind of juggling through the incubator. Now I'm kind of juggling through my hatchling tubs. Hopefully, well, this weekend I'm actually shipping out some snakes. I'm shipping out some of my retics and maybe selling a couple albino het pieds. So it's kind of a balancing act. So I'd say if you're breeding ball pythons, you don't necessarily need a tub for every hatchling because they kind of come throughout the year at different times. And then you'll sell them before you'll fill them up. So at some point I might need another hatchling rack though, the way things are going. I'm holding back some really cool snakes this year. As a matter of fact, in one of my next videos, I might show you all my holdbacks, some of the really cool stuff that I held back from last year and this year, which is pretty awesome. So this guy, I actually looked at the spine in the last one and the face. You always want to look at the eyes, make sure they have both eyes, no, especially around the mouth, no like weird genetic anomalies, especially if you're working with some of the dark genes. Sometimes you'll get some weird mouth defects like your super black pastels, super cinnamons and stuff like that. You want to look at the mouth. You want to look at the eyes, make sure they don't have any problems. Look for kinks. This one doesn't have any problem. Another thing I looked up when I was upstairs looking up those scaleless is it seems like everybody else's scaleless, the completely scaleless, doesn't have any mouth, the heat pits on the mouth. So maybe I was wrong about that. The micro scale versus the super scaleless head on that one. The other thing I noticed about that scaleless, completely scaleless one, if you look back at that, the shape of the nose was different. It was actually like pinched in. I was looking at all the super scaleless heads over on Morph Market, and they all kind of had the pinched in nose, almost like almost kind of like the super cinnamons or the super black pastels. They have kind of like a pug nose, I guess you could say, kind of a weird shaped nose on those scaleless ball pythons. That kind of surprised me. I actually didn't mention it earlier, but I did notice it. And I went over to Morph Market, and it seemed like everybody's was like that. So sometimes you get kind of like some weird head shapes or something that's just a normal characteristic of your ball python, not necessarily like a genetic defect. All right, so I'm gonna grab a name for this guy. The last one, just a regular pastel. Here's a good name for this guy. This guy's name is Twizzler. All right, so that's pretty much it. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for hanging out pretty much all night long, checking out these snakes, putting them up in the hatchling rack. All right, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.